Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and welcome to another episode of Wild and Live, the show that brings you some of the coolest facts from the animal kingdom with the help of some awesome guests. That's biologists, conservationists, and filmmakers from across the world. Last week, we had a super fun conversation with Gavina Gatore from Fauna and Flora International. We were talking about her time studying bats out in Myanmar. We also touched on some unexpected relationships between bats in those caves, the cave bats, and Buddhist monks who are working to help protect them. Really interesting story. If you want to find out more, make sure you check out that video. It's called Holy Bat Cave. Appropriate, right? Once we're done with today's stream. Also, big news this week. One of my shows, it's called Wild Animal Babies, is going live out on one of Sky's new channels, Sky Nature. That goes out on Sunday, I think about 8 p.m. So please do tune in. Lots more to talk about later on this week. So I will be keeping you posted. If you are a new viewer, please make sure you rewind. If you're a new viewer, make sure you smash that subscribe button and become part of this growing community. Your support truly means a lot. Today, let's get into it. We are going to be talking, our guest today is going to tell us what poo can teach us about relationships. Josh Arbon, are you wild and live?
Hello, I hope I am. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Good to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
Reminder for everybody that is watching, we're going to be talking about the dwarf mongoose. If you want to ask Josh any questions, please make sure you pop them into the chat box and we'll see if we can get him to answer those questions for you. So yeah, thanks for joining us, Josh. Really good to have you.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's lovely to be here and be able to talk about one of, if not my favourite animal.
Fantastic, perfect. Now, Josh, you're fascinated by the social behaviour of animals. You spent 6 months in South Africa, which sounds amazing. You were looking at the intricate lives of the dwarf mongoose. So here's our most important question of the day, of the week, probably of the century for you, really. What is the plural of mongoose? Is it mongooses? Is it mongai? Is it mongopodes?
So this is one of the questions I probably get asked more than anything else about any of my research, and I'm happy to reveal to the world that it is in fact mongooses. As much as it might not sound right, goose, geese, it isn't mongoose, it is in fact mongooses.
Okay, cool, we got it. There you go. Straight from the horse's mouth.
There it is.
Mouth. Mongooses. It sounds really strange to say, but I'm going to take your word for it because you are a mongoose expert. So, Josh, let's get into it. Can you tell us about the dwarf mongoose? For those that don't know what this creature animal is, like, I think for most people that were born in the 80s, they might be thinking of a bike, those mongoose bikes.
Those BMX bikes, for sure. I know the ones.
But we're not talking about bikes, so can you tell us about this creature? Where does it live? What does it eat? What kind of animal are they?
Yeah. So the dwarf mongoose is a mammal, and they are, as the name suggests, they are a mongoose, one of many mongoose species. But they are the smallest mongoose. Again, the names are very useful here. The dwarf mongoose. They are the smallest mongoose, and they're actually Africa's smallest carnivore in the sense so mammalian carnivore, and they are tiny. When I'm talking small, I'm talking sort of this sort of size. These things weigh 200 to 300 grams. They're smaller than a school ruler. And they live throughout southern and eastern Africa, so South Africa all the way up to sort of Ethiopia in the east of Africa. They are unbelievably cute. They are fluffy. I love them. So if people are thinking, you're trying to work out what they're to think of, socially, dwarf mongooses are quite like meerkats. So even though they haven't got it in the name, a meerkat is actually a type of mongoose. So they share a lot of the same social characteristics. They live in family groups. They have a dominant pair that kind of do most of the rest of the group are their offspring. So if anyone ever watched Meerkat Manor back in the day, I don't know if you remember that TV show with all that sort of stuff. So socially, they're very similar to those. But our dwarf mongooses live in sort of a bit less dry climates. So meerkats are more desert species, a bit more specialist in deserts, whereas the mongooses live in sort of semi-arid conditions. So what is called bushveld. So it's still pretty hot and pretty dry. These parts of South Africa are up to 40 degrees in the summer and it doesn't rain for months, but it's not quite a desert in the sense that people think of when they think of sands and dunes and stuff. So our mongooses go around in these groups and they eat lots of different things, but mostly sort of invertebrate prey. So we're talking about grasshoppers and crickets. We're talking about beetles and grubs. They will kill scorpions. Sometimes they'll kill snakes and eat snakes, which is incredible to see.
Wow.
And occasionally they might even snag a bird. So they've got quite a varied diet of anything basically small that they can dig up or catch.
Snakes and birds for such a small
Yeah,
animal.
yeah, it's crazy.
That's really impressive. What
Yeah, and
about oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was about to say that includes. I've seen mongooses, so they're even. I've seen them fight off things like black mambas, these snakes that have these fearsome reputations and have enough venom to kill however many people, and all these sorts of crazy stories. But a family of mongooses will very happily take one on, and they're actually they've evolved to be immune to the venom of these snakes as well as a sort of coping mechanism of having so many of them in the environment.
That's incredible. I want to get onto
Yeah,
that
they're amazing.
a little bit later, but let's.
Yeah, of course.
I want to finish or just touch on like how they live. So you
Yeah.
talked about the fact that they live in these kind of semi-arid environments,
Yeah.
bushveld. What about their actual homes? How are their homes
Oh,
organized?
cool.
Do they live
Yeah.
in trees? Do they live in
Yeah,
tunnels?
yeah, yeah. So they actually love termite mounds. So all these big termite mounds, these massive structures built by these little insects, they'll take those over and they'll dig out burrows into those, and they'll take over burrows that have also been dug into those. So they'll sleep in them overnight, and it's brilliant. You'll see these termite mounds they're incredible natural structures. They can be sort of 3 or 4 meters tall, some of them, and there are little holes popped through all of them. And you'll get there in the morning and see all these little mongoose faces start poking out when they get up in the morning. Sometimes they'll live in sort of burrows under roots of trees. Sometimes they'll even actually climb trees and live in little tree holes. So in their territory, there can be tens, if not hundreds, of separate sleeping spots, which they kind of move around with. As obviously, they move around as their day and as part of the different yearly cycle.
Nice. Okay, so you're talking about the fact that they can even take on some really fearsome enemies. You spoke about the black mamba. They are really
Yeah.
territorial, dwarf mongooses. To me, that doesn't seem to make sense because like they're despite it's like they're super territorial, but they're really small. What about 250, 300 grams?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
Surely they have a number of different predators that would happily take them, for a meal. And I mean, not take them
yeah,
out for a meal, as in take them
yeah.
as a
Oh
meal.
no, yeah,
That
yeah,
would be a bit
yeah,
weird.
yeah.
So surely that, being territorial would make them more prone to being attacked. Why don't they prefer to be more inconspicuous?
So yeah, so mongooses they are a classic bush snack for most animals. There are suites of. I mean, South Africa is an incredible country if you like birds or mammals because there's so much variety. I mean, but that's not great for mongooses because there are tons of hawks and eagles that would very happily snatch one up, and I've seen it. I've seen it happen. And there are also lots of some of the smaller cats we see, things like serval and caracal and jackals, some of the other things that would very happily snatch a dwarf mongoose, and it is really not much more of it than a snack for some of these animals. But yeah, so they're really territorial, I think, due to the area in which they live. It's just such a hard environment, and it's all about resources. So I reckon if you tried to, if you were a dwarf mongoose and you tried to sort of go it alone, there's not really much you have in the way of defenses from having other individuals around you, and it's also really, really difficult to breed and find enough food for yourself and look after a whole litter of pups on your own. Due to the way that they forage, they're kind of always with their heads down, they're digging. The environment's quite complex. Sometimes it's quite bushy, and it's really difficult to have your head stuck in the ground looking for a scorpion and also be watching the sky for an eagle.
So on that note, you speak about the fact that they're trying to look out for birds of prey like eagles, and actually
Yeah.
we've got a great question in from Rosalind Aberling, who asks what predators attack dwarf mongooses. So you
Yeah.
mentioned eagles. What other animals are
So,
on the lookout
so
for
I've seen there's
these
lots of
mongooses?
raptors, these birds of prey. So there are things like goshawks and shikra, which are quite like the sparrowhawks you might get in your garden in terms of size and the sort of things they do. You get things like snake eagles, which we see, which are slightly bigger, and again so there are probably a dozen different birds of prey that might take a mongoose in where I am in South Africa. And then if you expand that range up to Ethiopia, there's so many different birds of prey between there and their range. And then again, on the ground, you've got some of the smaller cats. Leopards aren't much of a threat to them just because of the amount of effort it would catch to catch a mongoose compared to the amount of food it's actually worth. But then even other mongoose species, so things like banded mongooses, which are about double the size, have been known to take dwarf mongooses, and whitetails, which are these kind of
Eat them.
big. Yeah, they'll take and kill a dwarf mongoose on occasion. We've seen it happen. The dwarf mongooses hate banded mongooses, just because they can very easily. The size disparity is such that they could just snatch one if they got the chance.
That's really
They don't
interesting.
often try, but it has been seen.
Gosh, so just for a size comparison, when we're talking about a banded mongoose, when
Yeah,
we look at a dwarf mongoose, what's the kind of size or weight difference?
about 3 times nearly.
Okay.
So a banded mongoose, I describe a banded mongoose as a 2-hand animal, and a dwarf mongoose
That's
is like
wonderful.
a single-hand animal.
Whilst you say that, let's take a look at some of these adorable
sure,
animals. I'm just going to pop that up here. I think we've got like 2 what look like baby dwarf mongooses kind of stuck between a rock crevice. Absolutely adorable things.
They are absolutely gorgeous. I mean, these pups, when they come out, so they spend when they're born, they'll be in the burrow for when they're born, they're literally peanuts. You see them being carried between their burrows by their parents, and you can barely see them. They're so small. The first time we actually get to weigh them, they're a couple of weeks old, and they weigh about 50 grams, 60 grams. These things are so diddy, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, baby dwarf mongoose.
Yeah,
it's like
smallest,
little.
Crazy.
Even though they are highly territorial, these dwarf mongooses, sometimes they have been known to team up with other animals. Is that correct? And what animals do they team up with?
So they when they're out foraging, there are lots of animals in the bush that forage on similar prey and also have the same sort of group of predators. So these are things like hornbills. So in South Africa, for instance, it's red and yellow-billed hornbills. Think Zazu from The Lion King. There's one for you. But also lots of other bird species that also have these kind of similar foraging. They forage for insects and stuff. Things like fork-tailed drongos are an absolute classic. And so all of these species kind of have evolved to listen to each other because they all have alarm calls that have different meanings. So for the dwarf mongooses, for instance, have a separate call for predator on the ground and predator in the sky, because those, there are 2 different responses there. If you're on a rock and it's predator in the sky, you want to get under that rock because it can't get you. But if you're on a rock and you hear predator on the ground, you don't want to be diving in the ground.
That's very
so
clever.
They have these different vocalizations, and mongooses listen to what hornbills are shouting about, and they listen to what drongos are shouting about, and vice versa. And there are reports that there are some studies that show that hornbills will give alarm calls to predators of the mongooses that don't actually eat the hornbills to sort of let them know. And they all forage a little bit better and a little bit safer, this kind of herd security.
So it's kind of like looking after each other.
Yeah. They look out for each other's predators, and they all benefit because they all get a bit more safety and they all get a bit more food because they're not constantly scanning the air for threats.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, look, I want to find out more about what you kind of learned throughout your research. But a quick question: how do the mongooses mark out their territory?
Okay, so they use a variety of methods, and they're all quite smelly. So mongooses are really like scent-orientated animals. They do lots of scent-based stuff. So around the edges of their territory, there are these sites, what we call latrines. So they are these might be rocks, these might be trees. They're just specific sites that over time get used over and over again. And when they get to that latrine site, they'll have a sniff of it, and then they all start weeing on it. Basically, they'll do a wee on it, they'll do a poo on it, they'll rub they have a scent gland, an anal scent gland, which they kind of rub, and they even do handstands. So they kind of get their front paws on the ground and kick their back legs up into the air and start rubbing their bum on this rock up in the air, and it's absolutely sick. It's so silly. It goes on for 4 or 5 minutes, and then they all clear off again. So they kind of have like a smelly boundary around their territory.
Right, so it's a mixture of just going to the toilet and performing acro yoga to kind of mark out your territory. I like it. Yeah, as part of your research, you had to get quite close to these mongooses. So how did you get them used to your presence? Like, did you have to wear a dwarf mongoose outfit like they do in the panda zoos?
I really should have thought of that. It might have been easier, to be honest. But it'd probably been a bit warm in the bush. No, so the project that I was working on, the Dwarf Mongoose Research Project, has been running for about 6 years when I was there at the time. And basically, to get close to dwarf mongooses, you have to just put in a lot of groundwork. So it's what we call habituation. So we basically are getting them used to our presence. Wild dwarf mongooses will see a person, they'll give you a ground alarm call, and they'll run away, and you'll never see them again. So over the course of what is actually months, you end up sort of getting closer and closer to a group. We have a set of noises that we make. We have like a hum and a specific call, which they kind of learn to associate with us and learn that isn't actually dangerous. And the key tool is hard-boiled egg. So if you hard-boil an egg and smash it up with the back of a fork and throw it in little sprinkles, mongooses love egg. So they kind of learn to associate us with with no danger, and that they can get a little food reward. Obviously not too much. We don't want to influence them in any way badly, but we'll use that as a a little morsel of bribery if we need to get them onto the scales, or if we need to get them for an experiment.
A little treat.
But yeah, it's just a lot of time, patience, and a lot of very slow movements.
You're talking about the little boiled eggs there.
Mm-hmm.
You've also found that mongoose pups have the incredible ability to transport themselves, or at least their heads, into a magical portal, aka the egg pot.
Oh, they love the egg pot.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, I mean, I'm just interested in how they kind of hang around you, and like, do they come up very close, or do they tend to keep their distance?
Some do, some don't. It's quite interesting because you really get to know individual personalities of the different individuals, and say in a group where you have 12 individuals, say you'll have some that will really happily come right up to you, and it's almost a job to get them off the scales because they know that gets them a little food reward, and I've weighed you, next you're done.
Yeah.
And there are some individuals that when it comes to either reapplying, so we put little hair dye marks on them to individually identify them on basically a paintbrush on a stick. And when it comes to refreshing those, some individuals are really wary, and there are certain individuals you just never really get that close to. And you have to put in the hard yards to really earn their trust. Whereas some individuals will be right there running up to you and sort of running rings around you, waiting for you to give them more egg. But yeah. You have to learn that you have to cut them off at some point, otherwise they'll become too dependent.
It sounds quite cool, actually.
Oh, it's fantastic.
The more time you spend with them, learning more about their characters and how they are all individuals. I want to move on to talk about sex and poo. So let's talk about sex and poo, because that's mainly my number one strategy of making this video go viral, of course. But also,
I'd love that.
When it comes to learning about the family structures of these mongooses, poo is a really great way of finding out who's related to who. Basically, you can find out who's been getting down and dirty with who. So go on, Josh, tell us about mongoose poo.
Who's with who with the poo? Yeah. So we, because of the social structures of these mongooses, and there is a dominant pair that does most of the breeding, but we want to know about cooperation, and we want to know about family structure, and all these things are really important scientifically. But to learn, because they often see other individuals mating with others in the group, and sometimes you'll have not the dominant female will be pregnant, and then she'll give birth to a litter, but some won't survive. It's really hard to know who is actually related to who. And to do that, we need to look at their DNA, the sort of the genetic code, and be able to match up. Okay, just like Ancestry.com or 23andMe and all those kits that you can get in the post. But to do that, you need some material. Usually in those kits, it's a cheek swab sample. But the best way in nature is to get blood samples or tissue samples. But those are kind of invasive. You have to catch the animal, and you have to get lots of vet licenses, and it's not very nice for them either. You don't, getting blood taken is quite painful and traumatic. Thankfully, when mongooses and most animals, has been done with lots of species, when you poo, some cells from the insides of the gut system will come out on the outside of the poo. So if you quickly nab that poo and do some fancy chemistry with it, you can pull the DNA from the poo without actually having to disturb the animal, and then you can go back and say, hey, you're not actually the daughter of the dominant female. You're the daughter of some other individual that's managed to sneak one of its pups in. What does that mean for how you interact with the group? What does that mean for cooperation? What does that mean for anything we might be looking at? So you can tell who's been sneaking matings. You can tell who's been getting more than their fair share by looking at their poo.
More than their fair share. And so have you found, what's kind of like the master plan, or what are you trying to find out from looking at these poo samples, checking the DNA, finding out who's related to who, and who is, like, what's that teaching us?
So currently we're midway through this project. Obviously, with all things in science, this takes some time. I think the poo samples are currently in a freezer in Swansea, with a collaborator. But obviously in the current climate, labs are closed, and we're having to wait off on that. But ultimately, lots of the questions we ask are about sort of cooperation. So mongooses are what we call cooperative breeders. They lots of individuals will forego reproducing. In nature, animals' number one thing is to do is produce offspring. That's kind of the modus operandi of all of it. And mongooses will often go 4 or 5 years in a group maybe without actually ever doing any reproduction. There's a massive question, why would you do this? This is all about the evolution of cooperation, the evolution of altruism. And if we can work out who's actually related to who, we can then look at, do individuals, do they more look after pups that are closer related to them than pups that are not closely related to them? Or do they look Do they, and this could be in terms of foraging, or they do babysitting, which is quite cute. Or we will look at, when we'll talk about in a minute, sentinel behavior, for instance. Do you like to guard more around individuals that you're really related to and therefore get more benefits because, you want to look after your kin? Or is it more related to who you've been in the group with longer? And all these sorts of questions will help us really drill down to how these things have evolved. And I think that's why I want to do it anyway. I think it's fascinating.
Just a couple more questions for you, Josh. You spoke about sentinel behavior. That's one of the things you were looking into. For me, that sounds like something that belongs in the plot twist of the next X-Men movie. Obviously, that's not what you're talking about. So can you explain to everybody what sentinel behavior is and how that relates to some of the things you were looking into, which was like foraging behavior and sentinel behavior?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's got a great name. It's one of those things scientists give fun names to things. I quite like it. So people, again, this will be another example where people I think will be more in tune with sentinel behavior from meerkats. So what it means is basically when an individual stops foraging, stops looking for food, and sort of posts itself up at a height, either on a rock, a termite mound, a tree, whatever, and looks out for danger. So meerkats do it in the very characteristic sort of, when you see them at the zoo or when you see them on TV, they're kind of always scanning the sky. And that individual then, if it sees a predator, will make an alarm call, and everyone else will run and hide, including the sentinel. Dwarf mongooses do this too. And I was really interested in, what are the things that make you do or don't do more of this behavior? So I was looking at, do individuals do more of this behavior when they're hungry as opposed to when they're full? Because to look out for danger, you have to stop eating. Right. So these, and also, if the environment is really dangerous, do you put yourself up in this exposed position more, or do you actually just spend your time hiding, and all these sorts of things?
So what were you discovering, that essentially they like to gorge on their food, make sure that they're full first, but once they are, they'll look out for their buddies. Yeah,
exactly that. So it kind of comes back to lots of things in nature. Although these are cooperative behaviors, lots of things can also be thought of as selfish. Individuals want to look out for danger, but if they need to eat, food comes first. So then once they've reached a threshold, and in this case we gave them a little supplementary feed with some egg, and once we did that, they would far quicker and for a longer amount of time would post themselves up and look out for danger for themselves and for the rest of the group. Conversely, if there was a dangerous environment, we'd simulate that by playing alarm calls of tree squirrels. They would actually put themselves up immediately or more frequently, due to the fact it's like, there is danger, I need to be on the lookout right now. Food can wait now because I know there is danger occurring. I need to go and check out what's going on.
Yeah, they sound like super clever animals. Really interesting, complex social behaviours there.
There's a lot going on, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's all we got time for. Fascinating insight into the world of dwarf mongooses there. What's next for you, Josh? Is it more mongoose action, or are there any other social animals that you'd like to spend time with?
Yeah, mongooses are done for me for now. I'm doing my PhD on jackdaws, so a British bird, which still have fascinating social lives. It's kind of a continuation of social biology. But so jackdaws are members of the crow family. You'll see them in gardens around the UK. And I'm now more interested looking at how the social lives of this bird kind of influences their cognitive abilities. So what they can do with their brains, basically.
Awesome. Sounds great. Well, look, Josh, it's been fantastic having you on today, and let's keep in touch. I'd be interested to find out what happens with the next phase of your studies and with the jackdaws, but it's been brilliant having you on. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
I'll take any opportunity to broadcast mongoose love.
Fantastic. All right, Josh, take care now.
Cheers, Patrick.
Brilliant. That was Josh Arbon, everybody. A great chat about dwarf mongooses there. Right, I think that's all we got time for. So make sure you check out the video I was talking about earlier, Holy Bat Cave with Gavina Gattore. Really good fun, really great chat that we had there. Also, later on this week, I have a new show I'll try that again. Later on this week, I have a new show coming out. It's called Wild Animal Babies. It's going out on a brand new channel, Sky Nature. Make sure you tune in. I think it's going out about 8 p.m. We've got some more Wild and Lives coming up this week and next week, so stay tuned. Keep an eye on the video list. And if you aren't already subscribed, please smash that subscribe button, become part of the community, and drop a couple of comments. I really want to know what you guys think about this and what subjects you'd like to see covered. So yeah, we're back again on Friday at 11 a.m. So until then, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.